Ryan Garcia is a pretty boy. He's the next big superstar in boxing. He's been a fantastic. I mean, his last fight was fantastic. He fought a great fighter.
But don't you think, in all honesty, to the purity of the sport of boxing, as you say, boxing is going great ways. Why would you do something as ridiculous as a circus fight and just let the kid go up the ranks, let him get as many titles as he wants, let him build his career, and do something like that later on? Because he's still young, he's still in his prime. Why risk possibly breaking your hand or, God forbid, anything else for something as stupid as a crossover fight? Because really, what the hell do you gain out of it besides, well, I understand you have money. Everybody's going to say money. We all know that.
It's all about money.
Of course that. But at the same time, a lot of times when it comes to fighters, they want to build a legacy. They have that pride in, I want to be the next undefeated guy. I want to beat Mayweather's record. I want to beat Della. You know what I mean? And I think that's what he should focus on.
Right.
Just like I think fighters in MMA, rather than go over to boxing, the up and coming, they should just focus on that thing. Don't start with this whole circus thing. Unless you're really hard up for the damn money, that's fine. I understand that. If you're on the end of your career and you want to throw that out there, fine, so be it. But why do that while you're in your prime, where this kid, obviously, come on, he's not in his prime right now. Maybe he hasn't even hit his prime yet, and he's still got a hell of a lot more fights to go in boxing. Why risk any type of injury or anything like that for something as pointless as a crossover fight right now?
Well, it's not a crossover fight. It would be a boxing match.
No, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes, I got you.
The whole thing is beating Ceruto doesn't do anything for your ranking.
No,
it doesn't really do anything. It's you win, yeah.
But it promotes boxing versus MMA, and that's what they want to do. And you know Dana White, if it's dollars that it shows, it will sell in his eyes, and he's all about making money because anything that they make. I don't know if you guys know this, and I will say this because I read some stories. Does anybody know how much Dana White made off that Conor McGregor Floyd Mayweather fight?
Oh, an insane amount.
Does anybody know? How about you, Tom? Do you know how much he made?
No, not at all.
Insane, probably.
$12 million. He made $12 million. Him. I'm not talking about the UFC. He made $12 million off that fight. Mm-hmm. Dana White. And he did absolutely nothing. Conor promoted it. Mayweather promoted it. The UFC and boxing didn't even promote it. And Dana White, because he said yes to it, the UFC made, I think, they made half the proceeds of the pay-per-view. Yeah. And Dana White made $12 million commission off that deal. $12 million to do nothing.
But here's the thing. That is not the first time Dana White has done something like that in that representative type role, or whatever you want to call it, advocate role. Mm-hmm. If anybody remembers way back when they had the second Grand Prix, the middleweight Grand Prix, Chuck Liddell was allowed to come over to Pride and fight in that middleweight Grand Prix, where Dana White was there. And they were hoping that the whole final was going to be that long-awaited matchup of Liddell and Sylvia. That. But unfortunately, Liddell got beat by Jackson. So it kind of screwed everything up.
That turned Rampage Jackson into a star.
Absolutely. Yes. And then later on, what happened? They had the rematch in the UFC, and that's how Rampage got the belt, only to lose it later on to Forrest. Mm-hmm. But long story short, this is not the first time that Dana has gone into that role, that quote-unquote like manager almost role. I would say more of an advocate, but where he's going to try to get some kind of money off it, because Dana White himself, and he admits it, he is a gambler. He'll take the chances on doing whatever. He'll put money on these fighters. He'll do this and all that. If it's not just business with him. It's not just business with him. He likes that risk of the gamble and this and that. He's Vegas 1,000%.
Right.
Any facet of it, whether it's the business side of it, the gambling side of it, the money, the talent, the showbiz, that's him, and he tries to bring that wherever he wants. So it's not a surprise that he's going to bring that. He loves boxing.
No, I understand that, and I think you're right in a lot of ways, but. Me as a...
If you remember, they wanted to start Zuffa boxing.
Yeah, I remember.
If you remember. I don't know what ended up happening with it.
It never happened. That's what happened.
Well, no, what I'm saying is I don't know what the UFC wanted to do after the sale, but I know that's something that Dana White always still wanted to stick with, that whole idea of trickling into boxing after the acquisition from WMG or whatever that was.
Well, look at it from the point of view, if... There was the boxing. I agree with the boxing MMA thing. If Tyson was going to come back and take another fight, and he was able to do the bare knuckle fighting against somebody like Vanderlei, who's got enormous knockout power, Tyson, who's got enormous boxing knockout power, it really becomes an exciting matchup as compared to the rumors or the stories on social media about Tyson and Holyfield. Who really cared? I wouldn't want to see that, but I would definitely want to pay to see Tyson Vanderlei.
Oh, I would love to see that. And by the way, I give Mike Tyson a lot of credit, and I'll tell you why. There are so many people that put this man down, and not only on social media. I follow Mike Tyson on social media. I actually personally know Mike. I've met him 3 or 4 times in his gym. I used to box out of his gym in Brooklyn. The guy is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. When it comes to talking to him strictly about boxing and about his career and where he wanted to go in his career. And at the time, Mike Tyson when I started training out of his gym, Mike Tyson just got out of jail. Tyson just got out of jail. So I know the little bit of background that what he dealt with. He actually told me some things that happened to him in jail that I'm not going to speak about on this show. But I will say this. This is a man that could still get into the ring. And if you give him a chance, if you let him fight 1 or 2 rounds, he can knock anybody out. I'm telling you right now. He can knock out any of the heavyweights. He can knock out Wilder right now. He can knock out Fury. He can knock out Anthony Joshua. I'm telling you right now, this man could still move as good and as graceful as we ever seen him do it. And now he's talking about going into bare knuckles. And if he goes into bare knuckles, if anybody knows anything about Mike Tyson, they tested Mike Tyson's power, okay? Every swing, every power punch to a bag, 2,500 pounds of pressure, okay? The average heavyweight in history, 1,500. He hit the bag 1,000 pounds of pressure more than any of the heavyweights. I'm talking about Rocky Marciano. I'm talking about Joe Louis. I'm talking about Joe Frazier. I'm talking about all the great heavyweights we talk about. This man hit the bag heavier than them by 1,000 pounds of pressure. That says what he is. And he can get into the ring right now, maybe not 2,500 pounds of pressure, but even if he hits you 1,500 pounds of pressure, could he knock you out? He can absolutely knock you out.
Listen, you get hit in the button, it doesn't take a lot of pressure to go night-night. Mm-hmm. And I mean, what Tom says in terms of Vanderlei, I mean, that's a nice, interesting little idea where you have Vanderlei and Tyson because
there's talks today.
Because Vanderlei started with bare knuckles when he was with the IVC and such, before he went to Pride, before he went to the UFC. IVC down in Brazil, the Vale Tudo and such, all it was bare. That's where you had headbutts. You know what I mean? You could dig fingers into the cuts, rip it open and such, all the way back. Even before the UFC started, they had this. So that's where he came from. So it's not, you know what I mean, it's a foreign territory, no pun intended, but it's not a foreign territory for him to go into bare knuckle with this, you know, and then Mike with that. I think that's the nice little crossover where it becomes what's better, MMA or boxing, because that's a little bit more of an even ground, where you bring the MMA guy over to boxing, well, you're fighting on their turf. If you bring in the boxer, like we saw James Toney come over and fought Randy Couture, well, you brought him over to my turf. Does that really answer any questions? I think the bare knuckle thing answers a little bit more questions because it's strictly stand-up, which you both have to do in both sports. Mm-hmm. Bare knuckles, the rules are a little bit different where you could play, you know, it's a little bit more of a medium, I think. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a nice little crossover.
You can put your hand around the back of the neck of the fighter. Man,
so you could dirty box.
Hold him into that headlock position.
So you could dirty box, which is even nicer.
I think. Yeah, so I think that kind of lends itself to that MMA mentality where you want to, with the exception of elbows to the head and whatnot, but you can actually do damage there. But the nice thing about it for somebody like Mike Tyson, except for the guy that gets in front of him, that the injuries are not going to be like the MMA. There's no knees and no elbows and no kicks. So I think it's a very comfortable platform for somebody like him and for somebody like Vanderlei or anybody at that level to fight. It becomes a very, very exciting sport, very exciting matchup, for both of them.
Wasn't there a rumor, Tom? Wasn't there a rumor, I think, when this first started with the whole Tyson possibly doing bare knuckle? Wasn't there a rumor about, what was it, Shannon Briggs possibly wanting to take?
Yeah, that's how. Yeah.
Just for comedy reasons, I would have liked to see that match.
No, that's a legitimate story. That was the original matchup
I got something else. It was a story that just came out on Dana White. Yeah. Dana White sounds off on the bullshit media stories regarding Conor McGregor and UFC 249. I will tell you this. There is somebody that's telling him about our show because I'm not lying. I watch so many shows on social media, on radio shows, media, press, that do not talk. They do not put down Conor McGregor and the 249 thing. They think this is great. They think the product, even the 249, what they put out, a couple of, not the last pay-per-view, the pay-per-view before that. They loved what he did and what he was putting together. I believe that, and I do, there's a lot of people that are talking because we just speak our truth on what we think is the truth on what's going behind closed and in the scenes, the back of the scenes of what's going on in the UFC. And now Dana White is actually coming and trying to protect what we're saying or other people are saying. I don't know who else is saying this because I listen to podcasts, MMA podcast on WFAN, ESPN. I listen to tons of podcasts. You
listen to ESPN? What?
I listen to anything because I want to see what they're saying. And they don't put down Dana White because he's their lunch meal.
You listen to Brett Okamoto?
I listen to whatever it is where I can. I'll listen to anything anybody speaks about when it comes to MMA because.
I'm sorry, I have just those two. You know how I feel about those two guys.
Yeah, I don't like them either. But
just
I listen to their show because I want to see what they're saying about Dana White, or they're going to take shots or attack Dana White. Nobody in the press that I've seen, even the press conferences that I see Dana White at in the last couple of weeks, not maybe one or two guys ask him silly questions, but very few of them are going to piss him off. I'm telling you right now, and I'm not lying about this, I absolutely believe Dana White is being told about some of the things that we have said on this show, and we have said a bunch of things about him. I've read some things about Dana White on social media. If you go to his social media Twitter page, he has said some things, derogatory things about the press and the media. Maybe he doesn't want to say anything, or maybe he doesn't want to come out and say, well, this, and he doesn't want to give us any credit for anything that we say, and that's fine. That's great. I really don't give a crap what Dana White thinks. But I'll tell you this, what he is doing to the MMA world, he is absolutely rebuilt this organization for better, especially what it was 20 years ago to now. It's been a great 15, 16, 17 years for the UFC. But the last 2 years, it has been garbage. It's been absolute garbage. I don't want to hear about the UFC fans telling me, oh, you're a hater. You're a boxing fan. To me, that's a bunch of crap. Okay, I sit here tell you what I think of what I've seen and what I've seen on the pay-per-views, and I'm sorry, Fluffy Whip doesn't sell me, okay? It doesn't. None of this stuff that he's putting out. Now, I think the kid O'Malley, he's going to be a good fighter. He stepped away from mixed martial arts for 2 years to get his stand-up where he needs it. So O'Malley could be something special. Maybe. But once he loses that fight, he's done. Why is it that Conor McGregor got choked out by Khabib, got suspended because of the whole rowdy craziness out in the audience? 9 months later, after one fight, he is the number 2 contender, or the number 2 contender to fight Khabib. How is that fair? Ferguson just lost a fight against Gaethje, and he was the number 1 contender for the last 2 years for Khabib. Number 1.
We can't really say anything about the rankings when it's the UFC rankings because they can control. It's not world rankings.
How does it not bother you?
No. But it's not world rankings.
By the way, Dana White is worth $500 million. So you know,
I'm surprised.
Since 2019.
But it's not it's UFC rankings. It's not world rankings now. So the UFC can manipulate it and has the right to manipulate. Well, I'm just saying they legally can manipulate it however the hell they want.